A nuclear bomb breaks apart over Greenland and one piece is never found, while the people living there are left dealing with the fallout. For decades, companies hid evidence that their products were killing people. Ancient texts, lost tablets, and even a secret space plane circle above us. These are discoveries that were quickly hidden from the public. In 1968, a US B-52 broke apart in the air over Greenland and went down near Thule Air Base. It was carrying 4 hydrogen bombs on a Cold War alert mission. When it crashed, it threw radioactive material and bomb parts across miles of ice and into the water below. Crews spent months out there picking through snow and pulling debris off the seafloor. The US and Danish governments said everything was accounted for, no missing parts, no serious contamination, but in the 80s, declassified documents told a completely different story. One of the bomb's plutonium cores was never found. It's still sitting somewhere at the bottom of North Star Bay. People in the area got the worst of it. Radiation turned up in animals. Inuit hunters got sick from eating contaminated meat they'd picked off the ice, and nobody told them what they'd been exposed to. Documents later showed the search was called off when it got too expensive. Back in the early 2000s, NASA scientists started noticing something weird. They'd sent climate research to the press office, and when it came back, it didn't look the same. Important data would be missing. The wording felt watered down, and the urgency just wasn't there anymore. Jim Hansen, one of the main people behind modern climate science, said his work was getting delayed or subtly rewritten even before journalists ever saw it. And then in 2007, an Inspector General report confirmed it wasn't just in their heads. NASA press staff had actually been told to tweak headlines, cut important details, and avoid saying anything too direct about humans causing warming. A lot of that pressure was coming from the Bush White House, which wanted things to sound more uncertain. Hansen even said he had to push just to talk publicly about basic stuff like temperature records or melting ice, and it wasn't just NASA. Researchers at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the Environmental Protection Agency said they were dealing with the same thing. After the report came out, NASA changed its communication rules and Congress stepped in, but by then, years of toned-down information had already gone out, making climate change seem way less serious than what scientists were actually finding behind the scenes. Around 2012, over 1,000 Canadian scientists signed an open letter saying the government had made it nearly impossible to talk about their own work. If they wanted to do an interview, it had to get cleared first, and the government media gatekeepers would step in, rewrite their answers, or just shut the whole thing down if it got uncomfortable. Fisheries scientists couldn't talk about salmon populations dying off without their words getting cut apart. Parks Canada shut down libraries packed with climate data, and some research stations lost funding right in the middle of ongoing studies. Under the Prime Minister at the time, Stephen Harper, roughly 2,000 science jobs were cut. After Harper lost, in 2015, a review found over 700 scientists have been kept quiet on topics from Arctic ice to fish populations. Libraries have been cleaned out, and some of that data was gone for good. The researchers who knew the most stayed quiet because speaking up could mean losing their jobs. So years of work on pollution, wildlife, and climate just never made it out. Tobacco companies knew that cigarettes caused cancer starting in the 50s, but they spent the next 4 decades making sure that that didn't get out. One of the biggest companies was Philip Morris. They're the people behind brands like Marlboro. Internal memos from Philip Morris showed executives reading studies linking smoking to lung disease as early as 1953. So they responded by trying to muddy the waters, setting up the Tobacco Industry Research Committee to produce studies that made the science look shaky, and paying scientists to argue publicly that nicotine wasn't addictive and the cancer connection was just coincidence. And they ran ads saying more doctors smoke Camels, which is insane to picture nowadays. When lawsuits opened things up in the 90s, over 40 million pages of hidden research came out. One 1963 memo had a company VP writing internally that the case against smoking was already airtight and that it was really just about doing their best to downplay everything. Sometime in the 70s, a papyrus book turned up in Egypt. A farmer had found it in an ancient tomb on the east bank of the Nile River. It was an ancient text called the Gospel of Judas, written in the 2nd century. Unlike the version most people know, this one says Judas was actually Jesus' closest follower and that handing him over was something that they planned together. The text was smuggled out and passed through the black market until it ended up in a safe deposit box in Hicksville, New York, owned by a dealer named Freda Nussberger. Scholars already knew that this text existed. It was written about as far back as 180 CE, but nobody had seen the actual pages. It sat in that box in New York for 25 years, slowly falling apart. Nussberger tried selling it for $3 million in the 80s and couldn't find a buyer. In 2000, the Messinas Foundation bought it and passed it to National Geographic, who used infrared imaging to piece together 26 damaged pages and went public with it in 2006. The early church had labeled the text heresy, which is why it never made the Bible. Starting in the early 1900s, archaeologists digging at a site called Vinča in Belgrade, Serbia, kept pulling up clay tablets covered in these strange markings. Those markings dated back to 5300 to 4500 BCE, more than 1,000 years before Sumerian cuneiform, which is supposed to be the oldest writing system ever discovered. But there were over 200 artifacts with repeating symbols. It looked like some kind of organized writing. Marija Gambudas, who was a Lithuanian archaeologist and anthropologist, called it the Old European script and believed it was evidence of an advanced farming culture with real symbolic language. But there were some skeptics. The symbols don't show up in sequences long enough to decode, so most scholars figure they were ownership marks or clan symbols. But after that, the research kind of stalled out. Funding didn't really come through, so history books just stuck with the idea that writing started in Mesopotamia. Back in the 14 and 1500s, Spain and Portugal were racing to explore the oceans, and they treated maps and sailing routes like top-secret weapons. Christopher Columbus's journals from 1492 were locked up immediately by Ferdinand and Isabella, the king and queen of Spain at the time. The public got a vague idea of where he went, but the exact coordinates for gold and trade ports were kept secret. Portugal set up the Casa de India, basically a super tight government office, to control everything about the route to India. They burned any competing maps and even threw sailors in jail if they talked too much. In 1494, the Treaty of Tordesillas split the non-European world between Spain and Portugal, but the exact boundary lines stayed secret so that rivals couldn't take advantage. Spain also had a master globe called the Padrón Real, which was updated only by navigators officially approved by the crown. Nobody else was allowed near it, and copying it without permission, that could be punishable by death. A cartographer named Diego Ribeiro actually got executed in 1533 for sharing too much information. And another case that shows just how precious this information was, well, in 1587, the English privateer Francis Drake attacked the Spanish port city of Cadiz. The most valuable things he grabbed weren't gold, weapons, it was navigation books. By 1600, over 90% of Columbus's journals were still locked in royal vaults. In 1889, a University of Pennsylvania team dug up 30,000 clay tablets at Nippur in Iraq, one of the most important cities in ancient Sumer. The tablets had math tables, hymns, and stories 1,000 years older than the Bible. Ottomans seized a big chunk of the collection during the dig. The University of Penn ended up with 20,000. Istanbul kept the rest. The tablets basically sat in basements in Philadelphia for decades. Then World War I happened, funding ran out, and a bunch of the researchers died before they could finish going through everything. By 1920, only 2,000 had been looked at, and then a fire in 1948 destroyed more. Over in Istanbul, the other half got shoved into storage with no labels and basically sat untouched until the 2010s. When Penn's collection finally got properly opened in the 80s, researchers found lost king lists, flood stories that mirror Noah, the oldest school records ever found, and job contracts from 2500 BCE. Iraq's half stayed locked through decades of war, and when Baghdad's museum got looted in 2003, thousands more were lost or destroyed. Boeing's X-37B looks like a miniature space shuttle. It flies without a crew, and no one outside the military really knows what it's doing up there. First launched in 2010, and its missions just kept getting longer. The first one lasted 224 days, and by 2026, the seventh had been orbiting for 908 days. Its flight path is secret, but hobbyist astronomers using public data have spotted it zipping over the Pacific and near Russia. Officially, it's It's testing reusable space technology, but almost everything it carries is a secret. It can change orbits fast, and during one mission it logged avoiding debris publicly while making other orbital changes that it never mentioned. When it pulled up close to a Russian satellite in 2024, it set off this real debate about whether it could be used as a weapon. China launched their own version called Shenlong in 2023. The program costs around $1.8 billion a year though, more than what the US spends on the International Space Station, so it's doing something important up there. While SpaceX streams almost everything they do, the X-37B goes completely dark. It just lands, rolls to a stop, and that's it. Whatever it's up to, the public still has zero answers. Everything is classified. And that's been the video for today. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, next time.